Hi, everyone. We're just going to give people a few minutes to join and we will begin shortly.
All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Andrew Lee. I'm a product marketing manager for our data and identity products here at Salesforce. And today we'll be discussing all things related to the Marketing Cloud Customer Data Platform, or CDP. In this session, I'll take you through how marketers can form a single source of truth for customer data, drive personalized experiences, and grow customer lifetime value with our CDP. And I'm joined by two of our expert CDP architects, Bobby Price and Gina Nichols, who will be helping us to navigate some CDP myths and misconceptions, talk through some key CDP use cases, and then do a deep dive into a customer case study and a platform demo. But before we begin, first and foremost, wanted to start off with a big thank you. Thank you for engaging with us. Thank you for being here today. Your participation means a lot to us. And then also just a really quick reminder that customers should base any purchasing decisions on products and services that are currently available in the market today. Let's go ahead and get started with some of the challenges that are happening in the industry that we're seeing related to acquiring a single source of truth for customer data. So I think we can all agree that our world is changing very quickly, and in the last couple of years, many customers and companies have shifted to position themselves as digital first. And why is this happening? Consumers are engaging with brands on many different channels in real time, moving very quickly from a website to a mobile app to maybe an email, and then calling up a call center. And they want to be able to interact with brands how they want and on their own terms. And at the same time, many brands are realizing that getting a single source of truth for customer data is foundational to their overall digital transformation. And then even during the COVID-19 pandemic, I think this digital first shift accelerated even further to be digital only in some cases, with many more instances of order online and pick up in store, more physical locations shutting down, which led to more direct to consumer and e-commerce strategies. I really think the long story short of all of this is that all of these changes have really affected how customers and brands are building and maintaining their digital relationships. But ultimately, the goal is to make these experiences feel as personal and as human as kind of live or human in-person relationships. But personalizing digital relationships is hard. Companies are really struggling to personalize or humanize these digital moments because it's often very complex. Digital first customers are very used to and often expect the same types of experiences that we get from the Amazons of the world. We want to see personalized recommendations like Netflix does, and so on and so forth. And we want companies to be able to know us and treat us like unique people. But oftentimes, digital leaders and digital marketers are faced with lots of disparate systems, data living in silos, customers with multiple identifiers, and tons of clunky legacy tools. And they're also facing the demise of third-party cookies, which historically have been the most common identifier for marketers to use. And new data privacy legislation like GDPR or CCPA will really make this transition even more difficult. So I think it's really safe to say that all of these factors are really compounding into a pretty big problem. And most brands struggle to create a single source of truth. I think the most common culprit, the most common problem area that we're seeing today is this very one. All of the systems that house customer data, in all of these, people are identified very differently. In our marketing systems, we usually, revolve around email addresses. Service or commerce systems are very different and might use different, data models, different data formats that are really all over the place. And, social media tools or platforms obviously are anchored around social handles. So lots of different identifiers, lots of different types of data being tossed around. And, I think marketers really need to build out a single source of truth and stitch together all of that identity data. And while they're doing this, I think the real question becomes, how do we gather all of this interesting data from all of these different systems into one place? How do we get it all under one roof? How do we tie marketing engagement data to commerce data? How do we tie, online community data to service records? And how do we, tie that together with, how a customer has asked for help in the past, via a call center or other method? And I think another big challenge is that while some of this data might live in the Salesforce ecosystem, in Salesforce platforms, a lot of it might not. So I think we need to find a common way to identify someone like Sam here on the screen throughout all of her digital experiences. And this is where the Marketing Cloud customer data platform really comes into play and really shines. So our CDP helps you put your customer at the center of everything that you do, and enhances your ability to truly know them and anticipate their needs. And I think the real value of CDP manifests across these 5 pillars that we have up on the screen here. First and foremost, I think building trust. CDP really ensures that preference flags and consent signals are the foundation of everything that you do in the platform when you're bringing in data from all of these different systems. And CDP really helps to make sure that you're reaching folks on the right channels, their preferred channels with their permission. And this really helps to ensure that your marketing is rooted in trust. With CDP, we talked a little bit about this before, but you can build a single source of truth by ingesting data from all of your different sources and resolving all of those multiple identities, those varying identities, to really put together a complete picture of every individual. You can also go beyond marketing. That's what we like to call it. You can really action your unified profile data across any engagement platform that you like, whether it's a commerce cloud, a marketing cloud, or a sales or service platform, or your typical CRM systems. You can also supercharge your analytics. We like to say that you can use Einstein or our artificial intelligence or calculated insights to build metrics to help you better understand your customer. So this could include customer lifetime value or propensity to churn. And this really helps you to build out more robust audience segments and really know your customers that much better. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier in our presentation, but really the CDP helps you set the stage and build a foundation for your first-party data strategy, and really preparing for that cookieless future, with third-party cookies going away. CDP really helps you to supercharge your marketing and go beyond marketing without having to depend on third-party cookies. All right, so now that we've set the stage a little bit, I think where we wanted to go next was take a few minutes to talk through some common questions that we hear pretty often from customers like yourself and our Trailblazer community. We recognize that there's tons of data management solutions in the market today, tons of acronyms, tons of three-letter acronyms, alphabet soups of data management platforms, and we want to make sure that we're all aligned in terms of what a CDP can do and how it can fit into each of your individual MarTech stacks and that you're operating in every day. So with that, I'll hand over the reins to Bobby to take us through some frequently asked questions for CDP.
Thanks, Andrew. So coming from the Crux acquisition, later known as Audience Studio, I'm going to talk a little bit about demystifying the CDP and the DMP. I think there's a lot of confusion in the market about what it is and what it isn't. So at a very high level, the industry is going through a fundamental shift, causing businesses like yours to really question the way they thought about digital marketing. So years ago, the cookie ruled the landscape, and it was the dominant currency that every marketer and publisher needed to get that message in front of the right user at the right time. However, the space has evolved to a more private, secure, user-first environment, and that investment that made the DMP the must-have tool in your stack was shifted to a more declarative first-party solution like the CDP. So what this means in more practical terms is that the third-party cookie or mobile ad IDs are being replaced by persistent identifiers like email addresses. Those traditional display media use cases made popular by the DMPs years ago are transitioning to more omni-channel engagements, and the days of buying that data that consisted of unknown users with unknown consent are coming to a close. So these changes aren't specific to Salesforce or even our DMP, and they're certainly not to force a client to pivot to a new strategy, but they're real trends and we're trying to help you navigate them. So with that in mind, it's important to note that the CDP is definitely not a DMP replacement, but rather the future of the marketing platform. So some use cases with the DMP may not completely line up with what you can do in CDP, and you may lose some familiar functionality, but on the flip side, you will gain some new comprehensive capabilities that you never had before. So if you're a current DMP customer or using a similar solution to that, just keep these themes and shifting industry standards top of mind in regards to how your organization wants to interact with your customers, rather than trying to make yesterday's solution work tomorrow. So we can go to the next slide. So I've touched upon a few key ideologies in the platforms and why they're different, but if you look deeper into the systems themselves, you will see some highlights. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but for those who may not be totally familiar with the differences in the product, I'll quickly go through them. So the first is going to be the data types and the usage. Again, playing off the idea of transparency, the CDP will be focusing on known declarative IDs such as email or phone number, whereas the DMP's primary keys will be third-party IDs and those mobile ad IDs, or MAIDs as they're known. So this change in data types leads us to the next biggest platform change, which is the connections to external partners. The DMP has been in the market for more than 10 years. So with that, it offers over 100 different endpoints, most of which are using the cookies and the MAIDs we just mentioned. While that number is going to seem really impressive, we'll likely see this list trimmed down as the cookies and the MAIDs dry up. As for CDP being focused on declarative IDs, the endpoints right now are pointed mainly at the internal clouds, so sales, service, marketing, etc. In addition to the native connections, the user can also send these audiences to an S3 bucket for off-platform activation. But understanding the need for more automated solution, a recent release that we should note is the App Exchange. This will allow CDP clients to send their segments off-site for different activations. Some of the partners that were just added are Hulu, Trade Desk, Yahoo, all being met with a lot of fanfare. And the last difference I do want to call out on this, it's something that's actually commented on quite a bit from clients who use both platforms, is the overall reporting and insights available within CDP. So with DMP, you're limited to the built-in capabilities of the system, which can cap your options, to be honest. Whereas the CDP allows for outside integrations, the powerful tools like Tableau or Datorama, which will provide a more advanced, robust reporting suite for you. So with that, let's now hear from Gina on another popular topic, the CDP and the role of an MDM.
Thanks, Bobby. A common misconception in the field is that CDP will unify data from all data sources and create a persistent golden record with an ID that can then be federated to downstream systems. It's important to note that CDP is not a MDM. It cannot create a golden record and an ID that can be persisted. CDP can, however, perform identity resolution by clustering records together that you can then use for driving a moment in time segmentation. CDP is not the same as MDM, and you can't replace a MDM with the CDP. However, CDP can consume master data provided to it, like say from an MDM, and use it for unification and harmonize it. Essentially, you can use a separate MDM tool and use the golden record ID provided by it and use it to unify all your records in CDP. A couple of things that are important to note: MDMs, in a sense, consume transactional company data and require heavy processing and can't support behavioral data quickly enough for a marketer to be agile and dynamic. So you can't pivot with an MDM easily. But with the CDP, they actually drive real-time interactions, which can be derived from both transactional and behavioral data. Here are some key differences between CDP and MDM. I'm just going to highlight a few things. One is the audience. The audience for CDP is marketing, whereas for MDM, it's IT. Also, the functional purpose, the CDP is engagement-based, whereas MDM is operational. And as I mentioned before, the ID is mutable in CDP, while it's persistent in MDM, and that's why you would want to use an MDM ID in CDP for unification. Also for CDP, the business focus is mostly B2C, while for MDM, it's B2B. And the implementation timeline for CDP normally is just a few months, while it could potentially take years to put a MDM in place. Now we're going to look at how the CDP actually works with a demo from Bobby.
All right, so before we jump into that, let's talk a little bit about why marketers might want a CDP. So while specific details are going to vary from client to client, the story that we hear mostly is the same. So marketers find their data to be bespoke, siloed, and segmented across many different business units. It sits in various clouds and has been entered in various formats. And in that state, it's almost impossible to tell the full customer story. To complicate these things, as everybody probably knows, the different business units don't often interact or have a clean way to bring this data together in order to paint the picture of the customer. So in other words, you've got all kinds of data in all kinds of places. So let's talk about 3 use cases solved by the CDP. So the first one is the unification and the harmonization. So this will allow you to pull in data from commonly used sources, including Salesforce Marketing Cloud, Service Cloud, or external systems via the Amazon S3. Once the data is brought into CDP, you can format the data into a more digestible form and stitch in different IDs together, allowing each of your system to recognize the user as the same user, which is important. And with the CDP's insights and analytics, the user can make better decisions by creating individual calculated insights that are relevant to your business. You can better understand how likely your customer is to buy or to churn. You can keep a pulse on their overall satisfaction. And all of these things together help you drive more meaningful marketing strategies. Finally, segmentation and activation. So this will allow you to create those relevant customer segments as well as those insights that I just mentioned with all of your data from all of your different systems, combine them with other implicit data behaviors and activate campaigns. So you might be, if you're really familiar with Marketing Cloud in this, you might be looking at activation and segmentation as the same. It's actually important to call out within CDP, there are two distinct motions. You can make your segment or your calculated insight just for that segmentation or the insight, or you can then send them to outside partners, internal clouds for activation off. So you do have two distinct motions with that. So to illustrate this in a little bit more practical terms, I'll kick it back over to Gina and we can talk about a specific client use case that has to do with the calculated insights.
So we're going to walk through in the next few slides, we're going to look at how Casey's implemented CDP and the value they received by their implementation. So a little bit of background, if you're not familiar with Casey's General Stores is a chain of convenience stores in the United States, mostly in the Midwest, and they have over 2,000 locations. And a little bit of trivia here, they're actually the third largest pizza retailer in America. So when Casey's heard of Salesforce's CDP, they wanted it so that they could market to every guest based on their individual past purchases, with the goal to increase repeat purchases and customer loyalty. Casey's is growing rapidly, and in the last year alone, they have seen over 10 million guests who in over 1 billion transactions purchased from Casey's 100,000 different products. These purchases happen in their mobile app, on their website, in their stores, and even at their gas pumps. Using CDP, where they brought in data from multiple data sources, used Amazon S3, they were able to establish a single view of their guests, and then they were able to create segments and deliver relevant promotions to customers. They were able to re-engage lapsed buyers, convince new loyalty program members to make purchases, and incentivize frequent buyers to make additional purchases. So they essentially shifted from mass marketing to personalization at scale by bringing multiple data sets into a single source of truth. So this is how they put it into place. They actually calculated affinity scores based on behavioral data. So they ingested the customer's behavioral data, like their transactions, into CDP, and then they created personalized rankings based on the products they purchased and the frequency in which they purchased. So they looked at guest transactions over a period of time, went through, looked at the products they purchased, and gave a ranking based on the frequency of the purchases they made. So if I was a customer and I walked into Casey's on a regular basis and I purchased a pizza and a Coke every time, then my top two affinities would be pizza and a Coke based on my recent purchase behavior. So CDP gave Casey's a way to rank a guest affinity. So, like in this slide here, you can see, burgers, candy, pizza, Coke, Mountain Dew, but they still wanted to use this data in their regular marketing campaigns, and they didn't want to target all the products that were ranked for a guest. So they tied it to their marketing campaigns by making marketing content available by date. So every night there would be a process that would look at the marketing campaigns that were relevant for that period of time, and then look at a customer's ranked affinities, and then only display those affinities that had marketable content in their personalized messaging. So looking at a real-time scenario here. So here's the actual campaign. You can see Anne we have a guest called Anne on the left, and you can see her affinities. She pizza, Dr. Pepper, a fountain drink, juice, and affinity 5 is a Monster soda. And on the right, you can actually see the email that she's seeing based on her affinities and what's being marketed to her for that particular campaign. It looks very simple to get this level of personalization when a customer's marketing campaign is run using the world's most powerful customer data platform. Casey's was successfully able to go live with this campaign in August, and they've seen an engagement uplift of over 25%. So this personalized campaign shows that when people receive personalized content or hyper-personalized content, they really respond to offers based on their own personal data. Thanks to Salesforce CDP, this era of hyper-personalization has now arrived. Now to Bobby to see the actual demo.
Now, Gina, it's time for the demo. Just bear with me for a second. All right, can everybody see this now? Andrew, I'll look to you for a nod. All right, cool. So as Gina mentioned, we're now ready for the demo. So welcome to Salesforce CDP. Right now, what we're looking at is the home screen of the CDP. So what we can see here are the total number of data streams that we've ingested. So a data stream is the different streams that you brought in from your either internal or your external clouds, the segments created with the data from that, and then the actual activations. If you recall from my last slide, segmentation and activation are two distinct motions. So you could have all of these segments here just for learning and insights and say, I'm only going to run campaigns against 19 of them. Underneath that, we'll have the total number of records that have been ingested by the CDP, so you can keep a tab on that. And then we have a quick view of all the data streams, the segmentations, and the activations. Again, this is just the home screen, but all of those different tools are up for you at the nav bar. I'm just going to move that. And it's also customizable too. So what you see on my screen may not be totally what you have for CDP. One thing to keep in mind as we go through some of the demo is that we set this up for every product that we have access to, which may not be what you have. So don't feel like you don't have what you should. So the first step we're going to have here is a data stream. So as I mentioned before, the data streams are the way that we bring in data from Marketing Cloud, Service Cloud, wherever to CDP. And as you can see here, we've brought in data from everywhere. So we have it from the CRM, from the Marketing Cloud, from Interaction Studio, which is pretty new, from the Commerce Cloud, even things from Amazon S3. So how do we bring it in? Well, we go over to this new button, and we're going to have our options to bring in our data streams from our connected sources. So again, we have connected sources from everywhere. We have CRM, we have Marketing Cloud, we have API, we have Interaction Studio, we have Amazon S3. For the purposes of today's demo, we'll just focus on the Marketing Cloud. And when this loads, we'll see two different options at the top left. So we have our starter data bundles, which are pre-configured, pre-mapped, and we'll focus on mapping in a second. But we have these already ready to go outside the box. They're engagement level data that when your CDP has been set up correctly with your different clouds, you can bring in the people who have interacted with your emails, who have clicked in certain buttons that you might have put in there. You can bring it in from Email Studio, Mobile Connect, or Mobile Push. Again, they're prefab ready to go. So if you don't know how to do data mapping or you haven't got there yet in your journey, you can bring these in, no problem. The next is the data extensions. So once you're set up with CDP, you can have all of your different parent seats within Marketing Cloud feeding in. So for this, let's just grab NTO Outfitters. We'll have our folders here for data extensions or shared data extensions. And then what we can see here is all the different extension names that we can bring in. I'm just going to see if this will work. Sometimes I get thrown an error, but there you go, I don't. So once the data is ready to go, we have to pick a primary key. We can ingest the data and it will be ready for mapping. So what does it mean to actually map a data stream? So what we see here is the screen. Once you bring in your data, you have to map it. So it comes in on the left here is a DSO, so a data stream object, and you need to map it here to a DMO or a data mapped object. And why that's important is anything that's mapped from the left to the right will show up in Segment Builder or your calculated insights later on for you to actually make some sort of meaningful data point with. Now, because the CDP will take data in from all of your different sources, it needs to know that this key means this key that I brought in here on this side equals this key on the right side. So we need to make sure that our naming conventions are the same. So we can see here that in this one data stream, subscriber key was listed as the primary key, and it's now mapped to the individual ID. This idea of the individual, this is a key theme within CDP. Everything has to map back to that individual, and if not, the unifications and the profiles will probably be off. We need to know that subscriber key in this is individual, and we need to make sure that that's a uniform decision going across all of your different streams. Okay. So with that, once we know that the data has been ingested through the stream, it's been mapped properly, your goal here is to actually build what we're going to look at. If you can just slow this down. We're going to want to build a data model. So a lot of this seems really complicated, but if you're going through implementation, it really will make sense. What you want to do is have everything kind of lead back to the individual. And if it doesn't lead back to the individual, it should lead back to something that leads back to the individual. And this map here is the way that you make sure that you're keeping your data model really tight and compact and sorted out. So again, once the data has been brought in, it's mapped, it should look nice and pretty. We're ready to make a segment. So we go in here, you can see all the different segments that are in our NTO account. To make a segment, simply click the new button, and we just have some information to put out. So when we say we want to segment on, how do we want to segment? You may not have all these options, but for this, we will do the individual. We'll call the segment name Shell 1. And then we have an opportunity to put in a description of said segment. So here, I'm just going to put in NA test, not a big deal. Next, we have to pick our publishing schedule. So we have 3 options here. So we have 1, don't refresh ever. I just want to make it and forget about it. The next is we want to refresh it every 12 hours. And then from there, we can go to every 24. So for this, we'll just say don't refresh. And when we do that, we don't need to pick a start date, a time, or an expiration. But if we do pick, the 12 or the 24-hour options, we do have to do that. So let's just say today, that has to be the current time. Let's say tomorrow, 12 o'clock, and the expiration date will be, let's just say Saturday. So we save that. Okay. So when it comes back, what we're going to see here is every single user that you have available to you. So the way that the segmentation engine in CDP works is kind of like a funnel. So we started here with 24.1 million different users within my CDP environment. And here I have all of my different attributes that have been mapped within my data streams into my model that I can now use. So let's just say we have our direct attributes and our related. Direct are one-to-one to the user, whereas the related become one-to-many. So let's just grab some IDs and we'll throw it in there. So in my getting started, we have a story about a user has to create something based on loyalty status. So if we go over here and we say, is a loyalty member, we can just drag and drop. We have attribute is loyalty member. We can change the operator to, it defaults to is equal to, or we can change to has no value, is equal to, contains whatever. We'll just keep it there and we'll type in is equal to platinum. We'll hit done. Okay, from there, let's just say we're going to go into primary store, preferred store location. We still have that in here. It doesn't really matter, but preferred store is perfect. And here, let's just change the value to has no value. So we hit done. We can see the rule operator defaults to and, but we can also change these based on Boolean logic to or. You can keep adding or changing your rules. When you do hit done or you do hit save, this number will recompute and you'll get something that looks like this. So we've already done this to kind of save some time, and we see that that 24.1 million has now actually dropped down to 230,000 different users that are in that segment. Once the segment is ready for, you decided that you want to send it out to the marketing cloud or send it to an S3, what we're going to want to go do is we're going to go into our activations. Now you can see here, as I switch down to all activations, I don't actually have a new button here for this demo account. They don't want me actually activating it, but I do know a little trick. So let's say we pick our segment, we're ready to actually send it out. We go over here, we have our segment, multiple store purchases the last 90 days. We go in there and we say, okay, where should we send this? Now this seat, don't worry about it. You'll see a ton of different endpoints that you could send it to. For this demo, let's just pick the NTO kids. And what it will do now is default back to how we decided we're going to make the segment. So we want to filter on the unified individual. We hit continue. and we're set with another group of options. Now, the first option is email or phone. So what this means is when the payload goes over to the Marketing Cloud side, what's included with the segment? Do you want just email addresses or phone? Some clients will actually just pick email by default because there are no actual phone numbers, SMS, within their CDP itself. But for this, we can click both. It's not going to change anything. Just more people to match with. We hit next. So now we have the attributes that we want to add in. So what is an attribute, or why does it matter that we have all these individual attributes? So as you know from Marketing Cloud, when you create your journey or you have your email, you can personalize these emails to how a user, what's their favorite store, or what have they bought recently, or what's their gender, what's their name. You can basically take data that wasn't part of the original segment and add it in to the load that goes over to Marketing Cloud. So you can now customize these emails to make sure that the user knows that you know who they are, what they purchase, what their affinities are, and things like that. So if I hit save, hit next, we would be ready to go, and that would be an activation. So I'm just taking you through the basic segmentation of the data that we brought in through our different data streams. But the other thing that you can do within CDP, and I'm going to pass this to Gina in a second, is you can take all that information, you can turn it into a calculated insight, and then take that insight and then actually activate that as well. You don't just have to activate the segments that you create. Insights are welcome as well. So with that, Gina, I'll pass it to you, and we can take them through a little bit of what you showed them with Casey's, but kind of just a different flavor of it.
Definitely. Thanks, Bobby. So as Bobby mentioned, you can create what's known as calculated insights. And these insights are built based on all of the data that you have within CDP. So for Casey's, they created a whole bunch of calculated insights that gave insights into the purchase behavior for their customers. So, what was their propensity to buy pizza? What was their propensity to buy fuel in a particular hour of the day? And then using those insights, obviously they were able to tie to their marketing campaigns. They were also able to get a view of how their customers were performing across the board. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to walk you through the UI for calculated insights. And as you can see, I'm here, and you have an option to create. So when I create a new calculated insight, these are the options I get. So you can create with Builder. So what this means is this is a drag and drop interface. So if you're not calculated insights uses SQL, sorry, a disclaimer, I should have said that already. So you actually create calculated insights using SQL. But if you're not familiar with SQL, we have a builder. So where you can actually, it's a drag and drop interface where you can build your calculated insights. You can create with SQL. So this is where you can go in and you can type your SQL. You can create from a package. So let's say you have a dev org or a sandbox org or a different org where you've created these insights and now you want to move them from one org to the other. You can create a package and then you can import the calculated insights from that package. Or you can create streaming insights. So streaming insights are ones that are created to when you want to work against near real-time data. So, it's like engagement metrics coming in from a mobile app, or website behavior coming in. You would work on those near real-time data using streaming insights. But for our demo today, I'm going to walk through create with SQL because that's the primary use case that we've seen across the board. So when we go to create with SQL, this is what the UI looks like, and if you're familiar with creating metrics of any sort, a calculated insight requires a metric and a dimension. So let's say I want to know the total number of transactions that happened to a customer within the last 50 days. So in that case, my metric is going to be my sum of transactions, and then my dimension is going to be my customer, because that's who I want this information by. So that's how I would go through and I would build my calculated insight. And you can see there's some helper SQL here on what should be included. There's a GitHub repository with sample SQL that you can review to see how to build these. You can create a calculated insight of all of the data objects that you've mapped inside CDP, but you can also create an insight on an insight. So similar to how you use your data model objects to write a query, you can use a calculated insight as well. So if I create a calculated insight that's going to give me all the transactions that happened in the last 30 days, I could then create another calculated insight that's going to consume the data from my first calculated insight. So quickly, I'm going to show you. So I've gone through and I created a calculated insight, and you can see this one is a complex one because I have multiple dimensions and multiple metrics. Here's what the SQL would look like. An important thing to note is that when you're writing your SQL statement, all of your data or your customers should relate back to the unified individual so that you can actually see it in segmentation and activation. This was something that Bobby mentioned as well while mapping. Similarly, you're going to map your calculated insight. The joins need to include your unified individual. So let's assume I finished building my calculated insight. I can actually include it in segmentation. So similar to the demo that you just saw, they would show up here under a separate separate header called calculated insights. And you can see in this case that I have this calculated insight called purchase insights. And these are the different dimensions, and these are the different metrics that are available. So I can drag and drop here, and I can say, okay, give me the average order amount, but it's greater than, like 100. I segment, and I could then publish that segment to Marketing Cloud. And similar to what we saw before, with the previous demo, I can include these values as attributes in my activation. So in the case of Casey's, they included these calculated insights. They use it not only for segmentation, but they included it in the activation. And then on the Marketing Cloud side, they had dynamic content that actually looked for that customer. Here is the calculated insight that shows the product affinity. And so I'm going to display this content. So that's how you can actually bring this whole thing into play by using calculated insights, not just for segmentation, but also for activation and to drive content in downstream systems. Andrew, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Gina. Let me go ahead and take over the screen share one more time. And maybe, Bobby, I'll lean on you this time to make sure that I'm showing my slides.
We're good.
Awesome. And I will actually kick it back to you, Bobby, too, now that we've wrapped up the demo, just to talk through some additional resources and ways that folks can get involved as they continue along their CDP learning journey. So I'll go ahead and advance the slide here and let you speak to this one.
Absolutely. So I do want to take this opportunity and review some key ongoing resources to help accelerate your CDP experience. So as many of you know, Salesforce offers many ways for you and your organization to stay plugged into the latest and greatest product information, as well as expert-led sessions like you're in right now. So as you can see from the slide, there are a few different ways to engage with us moving forward, but my quick plug would be to dive into the CDP Trailhead if you haven't already. I found the information within the modules to be a very solid first step in understanding not only the need for CDP, but the possibilities it creates for your business. It's also a great place to familiarize yourself with new terms and concepts, which we do always recommend before you start any implementation. So after that, you can see we have the Trailblazer community, which many of you are probably already a part of. The community is a great way to connect with other Salesforce customers to share knowledge, discuss use cases, and get ideas on other businesses and how they interact with some of the toughest questions about reaching audiences. So for any customer on Premier or Signature Success plans, you can take advantage of our one-on-one coaching or Ask the Expert sessions. They're a great way to engage in real time with our own team of Trailblazers, myself included. And lastly, we do have some information on additional resources, which will be more about the professional services team, how to get help with implementation, specific release notes, and readiness plans. The next slide, which I think, this is the one that I was hoping for. So I don't want to tease this too much or give away too much information, but ultimately what we're looking at here is the summation of a workshop that my team runs for a one-on-one coaching session, which is getting started with CDP implementation. So what this one-on-one coaching session is really aimed at is for the clients who are out there, probably many of you right now, who think, I just bought CDP, I don't know what to do, I don't even know how to organize my data, who should be involved. Well, if that is you, we have you covered. Simply reach out to your SM or your rep, provided you're on Signature, Success, or Premier, and we can get you set up with this one-on-one coaching session. It will be run by myself or someone else, another architect from my team, and we'll take you through all of those different ideas and the ways to start to think about, hey, CDP is a really big project. How do we decide what our use cases should be, or what data should we bring in when, and things like that. So again, this is just my quick plug to reach out to your SM or to your rep and get that set up. So I think from there, we're probably ready to do our Q&A then, Andrew.
Yeah, let's go ahead and use the remaining time here to go through some of the questions that you've all submitted, either during registration or throughout the session. So I'm just kind of collecting, from the chat and our list here. But maybe we'll start with one that kind of dovetails off of the CDP versus MDM, CDP versus DMP conversation. Bobby, I saw a question that asked, what's the difference between a CDP and a data lake? Could you speak to some of those kind of key differences at a high level?
Yeah, so the biggest difference between a data lake versus CDP, from what I've been kind of seen in the industry, or what I've heard in the industry, is a lot of clients a few years ago were coming to us with this idea of how do we make a data lake? We're making our own data lake. What should we do with it? And really the biggest difference is that the data lake is, well, I should say the similarity between the two is that they're both just data warehouses. The CDPs typically have a unification mechanism behind them, whereas your data lake built by any number of clients probably won't have one. But ultimately, they're the same thing in that regard. They just warehouse all of your data in a neat, organized way that you probably did have access to before. Again, the CDP just takes it a step further and unifies those individuals.
Thank you. Let's see. We had a question about different data sets. So when we're thinking about bringing in, so like your data ingestion steps, maybe a question for you, Gina. When we're bringing in data from other systems, whether external non-Salesforce systems or kind of some of the native Salesforce integrations that we have, what does that look like when you're actually going through and ingesting and maybe taking that next step to kind of map them to the cloud information model as well? How do you think about some of those things?
Definitely. So if it's from the Salesforce ecosystem, we have what's known as connectors. So they would actually bring in data from, say, your Sales Cloud and map it directly to the CDP's information model with minimal work. But if we were going to bring in, say, data from an external system that we don't have a native connector to, you could use several options. You could use the MuleSoft connector if you have MuleSoft, and you can orchestrate data transfer that way, or you can use flat files and drop them to Amazon S3 or to the Google Cloud Platform, and you could ingest data into CDP that way. But in those cases where we don't have a native connector, you do have to go through and you have to manually map into the information model.
Let's see, we had a question about identity resolution, and I know you covered this a little bit in your demo. Bobby, could you maybe speak to how this actually kind of works behind the scenes in the platform at a high level, and how folks might be thinking about match rules and how they kind of apply to some of their strategies that they're using CDP for? So I guess in summary, how does identity resolution work at a high level?
Yeah, so again, it really comes down to your mapping to make sure that you've unified your individuals in the proper way. One thing we didn't take you through, because most people here probably haven't even set this up, is you can actually select your match rules. So something like email address and middle name and last name and fuzzy email and so on and so on. So you can go kind of down a waterfall. I would make sure that your rules are as tight as they can be, but ultimately what it will do is it will say, okay, using all the information that CDP has available, let me take, this person's middle name or this person's first name, middle name, last name, email. Let's make that unified individual for them. And again, it's all based on the rules that you've set up to say, hey, when we have this is what we want to use. When we don't have that, let's go to this. When we don't have that, let's go to this, and kind of work down that waterfall, that funnel that way. So you, I guess in summation, you as the user will actually get to define how the system picks the unified individual.
Awesome, thank you. We had a few questions about kind of connectivity between CDP and I guess we can call it core marketing cloud, messaging and journeys. Gina, can you maybe speak to some of the ways that folks that have both platforms can kind of leverage data coming in from Marketing Cloud and maybe also back out as a part of activations to Marketing Cloud, and how do integrations with SFMC work at a high level?
Definitely. So we have a very tightly coupled integration with Marketing Cloud from CDP. So essentially, I could segment from CDP, and I can then activate it and publish it to Marketing Cloud. And I can then directly use that. So when I'm activating to Marketing Cloud, it's available as a data extension in Marketing Cloud. So then I can grab the data that CDP has given me and I can send against it directly, or I can use that data and derive additional data to fuel my campaign. If I'm looking for like a real-time situation, or CDP doesn't actually support like real-time triggers. Have, let's say, somebody signs up and you want a message to go out right away, then you would want to send that data directly to Marketing Cloud and not to CDP. But we do have an option, using streaming insights to actually be able to send near real-time triggered messages using what's known as data actions. So you can look at the data that comes in. So let's say somebody has entered a geofence, just an example here, they've entered a geolocation and they've triggered a geolocation, they've entered a geofence, and you want to send them a message, that's time sensitive, but not close to real time. You could use what's known as data actions, and you could trigger a message in Marketing Cloud.
Awesome, thanks, Gina. Also, just a quick follow-up. I saw a question come through about thinking about, how does your CDP play with different social platforms? What are some examples that you've seen of folks weaving in CDP and social into their overall marketing strategy, or maybe some use cases in terms of like how folks are using social data as a part of, their different strategies?
Yes. So again, good question, because this is a common scenario that comes up a lot. They are actually, as Bobby mentioned, we have app exchange packages where you could activate. So you create the segment in CDP, you have your known, it's all against known data. You can then activate it and provide it as a flat file to Amazon S3 or to GCP that can then be picked up and passed on to your social media platform. You can send it to app exchange partners, and then they could push it out to, say Yahoo or wherever. Another option is you could use the audience that's created by CDP to then create lookalike audiences in, say, Facebook. So those are some of the options or the ways in which you can use the data in social platforms.
Yeah, Gina, I think another thing too, which I've heard people do, I haven't actually seen them in practice, but when you create your data segment, it becomes an extension within Marketing Cloud. So then you can then send that extension to Ad Studio and whatever you actually have already set up within their Twitter or LinkedIn or something, you can also get the segment in that way. There may be a drop off of users depending on what the match is, but that's another path into your socials.
Let's see. We also had a question about strategies with CDPs and folks that are working very closely with, DSPs. Bobby, do you think you could speak to maybe some of the use cases that you've seen and how folks are thinking about activation, thinking about leveraging the different DSPs that they're already working with as a part of their CDP strategy?
Yeah, so right now, as I mentioned within the beginning of the presentation, so AppExchange did unlock the ability to send data to Trade Desk right now, Hulu, Yahoo, and I think the other one's called Nine. The Trade Desk would probably be your most, if you use the DMP now, use Audience Studio, I think that the Trade Desk or Yahoo would probably be something that you understand the most about how it's transferable. Hulu's been a great actual partner for the DMP as well. A lot of DMP clients use their data that send over there. It's not a true DSP in the sense that they're not buying inventory on other sites or off property. It's typically just on the Hulu proper. But that would kind of be the way that you would say, okay, I'm used to display advertising. How can I take that idea and then move it over to the CDP? And it would have to be through the app exchanges. I do know that those partners, they're not held to the typical releases. I know we release every quarter, but the new partners that we will release into App Exchange, it won't be every 90 days we add a new one. There will be multiples added during the month. It's all about just getting these people and these new partners up on the App Exchange, and then they'll be at your disposal to use as you would on a DMP.
Let's see. I think there was a question I saw come through, I think stemming from your demo, Bobby, to when you were going through the segmentation steps and talking through, refresh versus kind of like the refresh rates and things along those lines. Could you speak to what are some of the use cases when you'd want, different refresh rates or what that might look like?
Yeah, so keep in mind that the CDP, it's not an endpoint, it's the beginning of a new journey. So if every piece of data that you sent into the CDP comes from Marketing Cloud or Sales Cloud or some other S3 bucket, you probably want to keep that data as relevant as possible. So let's say you have a marketing initiative where you want people to do something on your site or click on something in an email. You're going to want that segment to refresh as often as possible, knowing that the data that's being fed into the CDP is probably happening more than once a day, right? Maybe you're updating it twice a day or something like that. So depending on how quickly you need that data up and out into the ether, out into an email to start a journey, maybe it's pushed to to Hulu to make sure that somebody sees it before that they watch the next episode of The Handmaid's Tale or something. You're going to want that segment to update because it's only going to update and be as relevant as the data that's feeding it. And then subsequently, as I get activated, I see said message, it's all because, the things downstream worked, upstream, depending on how you look at it.
Okay, just taking a look at the time here. Maybe we have time for one more question. I think this came through the Q&A, and maybe a question for you again, Bobby, but I think this is more along the lines of, as I'm thinking through my segmentation strategy, I'm starting to build these segments out. How can I sort of validate that my logic is working? How do I make sure that I'm having like the right, or in the ballpark, at least like the right number of folks falling in, and that, these audiences I'm building are fitting? Like, what are some maybe tactics that you've seen to kind of maybe check your work or make sure that these are the right folks, for an activation?
It's a really good question. So I was on a call recently with a client who were troubleshooting their segment because they said, I grabbed users who were in our loyalty program, let's just say, and they said it only came back with 80,000. I know there's a lot more than 80,000 users in our loyalty program. What could be happening? So we took a look back at that data map that I showed everybody with the different circles. And we saw that one of their data feeds that had loyalty in there wasn't mapped to the right attribute. So in theory, what they were doing is they were sending that data into the CDP, but they were mapping it somewhere else. So when you made a segment with that, phantom or that rogue attribute, you were grabbing loyalty members inadvertently. So it was a good way for them to go back into their data mappings, into their data relationships, and make sure that they had selected the right bucket to stick anybody who had a loyalty ID into their systems. That's probably the main one. If you still see that you've mapped everything correctly, and you still don't have those numbers, the next step would be, let's look at the data that actually supplies let's say loyalty IDs or loyalty members into the CDP. And if that's all right, unfortunately, we'll probably have to send you to support to make sure that there's nothing behind the scenes that isn't working correctly. But those would be the first two things that I would look at.
Also, there's
Awesome. Makes sense.
there's a product roadmap so that you could be able to write SOQL to validate to some degree what's in a segment. So that will be coming, but I don't have a timeline on it. So that will help verify if your segment is correct or who's in the segment.
Yeah, great call out.
Awesome. Thank you both. With a few minutes that we have left here, before we go, I just wanted to take a quick second to plug Trailblazer DX. Trailblazer DX is our Salesforce developer conference that's taking place in San Francisco next week. There's still time to register if you haven't done so already. And really just a great opportunity to connect and learn from Trailblazers from all over the country and from around the globe as well. So whether you are an admin or a developer or an architect or a combination of all of the above, somewhere in between, like I can guarantee that there is a session or workshop that's perfect for you. So go ahead and visit the URL that's on the screen here or scan the QR code to learn more and register. So that being said, I'll give folks, a few more seconds on this page in case they want to click through. All right. And last but not least, if you enjoyed our session today, there's plenty more where that came from. So I'd like to invite you to join us for part 2 of our webinar series coming up here on May 11th. It's at the exact same time as our session today, and we'll be doing an even deeper dive, really covering all of the core CDP capabilities and all of the tips and tricks that you'll need to stand things up properly and really hit the ground running. So this will cover everything from data source discovery to data ingestion and mapping to segmentation and activation. Really, like I said, kind of like a double click into some of the activities that Bobby and Gina showed us today. So stay tuned and feel free to scan another QR code here, which will take you straight to the registration page. Otherwise, we'll be reaching out and spreading the word on a lot of the same channels that we did for this session over the next few weeks as well. I'll do another slight pause here. And that brings us to the end of our session today. We really appreciate you all taking the time to join us, for listening in, and for asking so many great questions. We really look forward to staying in touch with all of you as you continue on your Marketing Cloud and CDP journeys, and can't wait to chat again soon during our next session. So have a great rest of your week and feel free to reach out with any questions as they come up in the meantime. Yes, thank you so much. Talk to you all soon.
Everybody.